Discussions on Victorian literature. Pay attention to this wonder of mind, folks, creatives and writers. Who's going to be the next Air Jordan of creative writing? A modern-day question for each one of us perfectly portrayed in history with the Victorians. Discussing Victorian literature, influenced from my Udemy classes, we'll discuss about literature and social change. A very exciting period of English literature that is the Victorian era. Hence, during this period there were huge technological advances. A very much an industrial period where much industries were established, the railway industry, coal was needed, and men and women worked long, hard days down the mines. There was a huge class separation in the Victorian era. Many writers, such as Dickens, comment a lot of the social structure of Victorian England. A lot of things happened in the working world, especially children becoming chimney cleaners, which are quite shocking to us now. There was very much an interest on the supernatural in the Victorian era, e.g. famous spiritualists such as Arthur Conan Doyle, who created the character Sherlock Holmes for a study in Scarlet, the first of 4 novels, and 56 short stories about Holmes and Dr. Watson. The key literary genre in this period is the novel, but there was also some interesting poetry and great plays. Charles Dickens. He was a novelist, a journalist, and social reformer, the most prolific of Victorian writers. Charles Dickens, 1812 up until 1870, left school to work in a factory when his father was sent to debtor's prison. This led to a lifetime of campaigning for social reform, especially in the workplace. He was also an advocate of children's rights, having joined the workforce aged 10. He edited a weekly newspaper for 20 years and wrote 15 novels plus 5 novellas and numerous short stories and articles. His most famous works include Great Expectations, Oliver Twist, A Tale of Two Cities, A Christmas Carol, David Copperfield, and Bleak House. In 1830, he met his first love, Maria Bidnell. Her parents disapproved and sent her to school in Paris. In 1836, he published the Pickwick Papers in serial form and began writing Oliver Twist. Queen Victoria read them both and stayed up past midnight to discuss them. Also, that year he married Catherine Hogarth, with whom he had 10 children. In 1842, he traveled to America with a mixed response. Robert Browning called Dickens an enlightened Unitarian. He was a professing Christian, but had some issues with the established church. The Bronte sisters. Associated with their connection to the Yorkshire moors, the role of women and romanticism in the Victorian age, as well as their influences, which they had been death, isolation, and Sir Walter Scott, that you can find all about him with a Google search. Charlotte Bronte, 1816 up until 1855, Emily Bronte, 1818 up until 1848, and Anne Bronte, 1820 up until 1849, are the most famous sisters in literature. They were novelists and poets inspired by Romanticism and using realism. They wrote under the male-sounding pseudonyms of Carol Bell, this is Charlotte, Ellis Bell, this is Emily, and Acton Bell, this is Anne. Their most famous works include Jane Eyre, this is Charlotte, Wuthering Heights, this is Emily, and The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, this is Anne. The sisters had published a collection of poems in 1846, which sadly sold 3 copies. They worked on prose and in 1847 released 1 novel each. Their influences had been the life of their family, their seclusion at Haworth. Anne used her experience as a governess in writing Agnes Grey. Charlotte described her love of Walter Scott, saying for fiction read Walter Scott and only him, all novels after his are without value. Charlotte and Branwell's Angry on Tales feature heroes from Lord Byron's work. Heathcliff and Wuthering Heights and Mr. Rochester and Jane Eyre exhibit traits of the Byronic hero, magnetic sexuality, passion and arrogance. George Eliot, one of the greatest novelists in English that in reality was Mary Ann Evan Lewis because Eliot is a pseudonym. So, why George Eliot? Mary Ann Evans, later Mary Ann Lewis, 1819 up until 1880, adopted the nom de plume George Eliot so as not to be associated with the light romantic writing of contemporary female authors, but also to shield her private life as she was living with a married man, George Henry Lewis. She published 7 novels: Adam Beatty, The Million on the Floss, Silas Marner, Romola, Felix Holt, Middlemarch, and Daniel Deronda. Despite her use of a pseudonym, her private life became public knowledge, but it did not harm her readership or book sales. Alfred Lord Tennyson. He was one of the greatest of Victorian poets. Amongst famous lines, he said, "'Tis better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all." That's from Tennyson's poem In Memoriam. He succeeded Wordsworth as poet laureate and held that position longer than any other poet. He influenced the pre-Raphaelite brotherhood with the medieval themes of his early poetry. He entered Trinity College, Cambridge in 1827. In 1829, he was awarded the Chancellor's Gold Medal for Timbuktu. He did not complete his degree as his father died in 1851. He then moved home to care for his family. In 1884, after he had previously refused a peerage, Queen Victoria created him Baron Tennyson. His role as poet laureate was constraining, but he wrote an official political verse. He was very much a Whig. He believed society would change through gradual reform rather than revolution. He felt universal suffrage, voting, would only be possible when the masses were educated. He was a pantheist. There was a creator God who became the universe rather than was in charge. The Lady of Shalott, 1832 by Alfred Lord Tennyson, was a poem of his as well as his sonnet, "Oh, where I loved as I desired to be." He lived in between 1809 and 1892.